All right, so the awesome task of philosophizing draws us forward once more, um, thinking, which everything else depends on. An attempt to intervene into the enigmatic fate of all beings, which is so rapidly carrying us all along with it, such that we scarcely have time to draw ourselves back from the blinding sun of um, all the futures that have already been decided in the prototypes of everything with which we encounter, including all our concepts. And I believe Heidegger is saying, including um, even the concept of consciousness, so far as it is understood by Descartes, um, because Descartes does give consciousness certain content, the doubting, apprehending as apprehending mere images rather than knowing. Um, if you go further back, eventually come to a comment which is uh, really resounds across long distances of Descartes, where Descartes says that, and I think he's just quoting the tradition. This is what he's learned from his school books, from the schoolmen, um, medieval philosophers. But it's obvious when you think about it with Plato, is that um, anything that we come across, it's not only that it's imperfect when compared to the prototype, but I think the funny thing is that it can't be more than perfect. So the prototype is also a limit. There's this idea of, in the seventh letter, Plato gives the example of the circle, and the circle is, of course, very important because of um, the movement and how does Plato call it, the rarefied air or whatever he calls it, in the heavens of the heavenly bodies, which come closest to perfectly embodying the mathematical forms, or in this case, the geometrical forms. Um, but what would it mean that a circle would be more than perfect? But it's funny to limit things to perfection in some sense. I thought, thinking about it through this Heideggerian sense of throwing away all our presuppositions. But in any case, let's read one further paragraph from the Basic Concepts book, the Grundbegriffe. B, the claim of the ground concepts, quote unquote ground concepts, calls for us to grasp the ground, reach the foundation. The title calls us to come to stand where a footing and a permanence are granted, where all decisions are made, but also from where all indecisiveness borrows its hiding places. So already, what if we superimpose for ground the nothing? Remember that the nothing nothings. Therefore, unlike Thomas, unlike the Christian, uh, I joke that the Christians um, are not even dualistic. The Manichaeans, in this sense, are much more sophisticated. The Christians only have the privation of being and being. But Heidegger here introduces the nothing into the ground. Going on from there, grasping the ground means reaching the ground of everything in an understanding that not only takes notice of something, but is, as a knowing, a standing, and a stance. So I think as we're being cast according to our prototype, which is also the manifold of personae which are available to us if you think of books like the Liquid Society and these kind of books about the Risk Society and so on. These books that speak about people changing um, their profession, say, and other identities which most define them as personas. And if you think of a persona as an agenda, as something to be done, as a duty, as an office which has always an impending program of activities behind it, um, then this means that each um, uh, the personas are all um, the prototypes. They're all things that keep us fixed in the future, but if and all things that are sub-perfect in that sense, because the prototypes are perfect, but the things we encounter are not perfect, like the example of the circle that Plato gives. We don't encounter the perfect circle except perhaps in the night sky, according to the Greek way of thinking, because they think of the sky as a totally different realm than the earthly realm. Um, but here we have introduced into the ground this sense of the nothing. But I think what Heidegger is saying in this line that we just went over, grasping the ground means reaching the ground of everything in an understanding that not only takes notice of something, but is, as a knowing, a stand and a stance. That means that Dasein will draw this nothing through itself, bring it up to itself, gather itself, and it become full, and it all this within itself, coming to the full presence of these features of itself, and then drawing itself into them as they appear. But what I mean is, in this thought, Heidegger isn't merely um, saying something for Geist, right? For the intellect, for the animus, uh, but he's saying something for Dasein, for something for um, the whole of being understood as Dasein, which means, in a certain sense, Dasein is that being which um, has time before itself as a dunamis, as something it can work with. Um, so therefore, what's at stake is how our Dasein will be. Our Dasein is constantly in flow in the ocean river, and or the river ocean. Um, and all we can do is try to intervene into it before we get swept away, or as we're getting swept away, but maybe we can attempt to come into some harmony with the way the flow is knocking us against the stones, which are perhaps at least a bit polished down by the long pouring of the white the whitewater rapids. Okay, so anyway, let's continue. We'll continue on with the Grundbegriffe, even though we're reading very slowly. We're in no great hurry, so, and the task, I believe, is the supreme task, so we should stay with it.